April 19th, 1944, 0512 hours. Camp Swift, Texas. The sun isn't up yet, but the sky is already glowing that faint metallic blue that hangs over the prairie just before dawn. A dry wind scrapes across the gravel yard, pushing dust around the boots of the American MPs standing at the main gate. Their silhouettes are rigid, rifles slung tight, eyes fixed on the convoy rumbling toward them from the eastern road. The trucks appear first as a dull vibration, low, exhausted engines carrying more weight than they were ever meant to. Then, as they crest the shallow rise, the shapes become clearer. Olive-drab troop transports, repurposed for prisoners. Canvas flaps snap in the wind. Inside, dozens of German POWs brace themselves, gripping wooden bench seats polished smooth by nervous hands. Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Bruckner presses his fingers into the canvas seam behind him, trying to steady his breathing. 26 years old, once an infantry platoon leader near Salerno, now sunburned, starving, and too tired to feel humiliated, he listens to the clatter of the truck bed and the muffled coughs of the men around him. Every jolt reminds him how thin he has become, knees like sharp hinges beneath his trousers. Someone whispers, "Amerika? Das ist Amerika?" Another replies, "Better than the Eastern Front." A few attempt a laugh, but it falters. Karl doesn't join them. For weeks, rumors had spread through captured German ranks. American captivity meant canned meat, cigarettes, warm blankets. Ridiculous luxuries when compared to the Wehrmacht's own rations, which by 1944 were reduced nearly to nothing. Most dismissed the stories as Allied propaganda. But now, staring out between the flapping canvas and the brightening horizon, Karl can't shake the question, what if it's true? The convoy grinds to a halt at the camp entrance. The dust rises in clouds. MPs shout orders, sharp but not cruel, and one by one the Germans climb down, some stumbling when their feet hit solid ground. Camp Swift is larger than any of them expect. Rows of wooden barracks stretch beyond the yard, neat and geometric like a military city. The smell hits them next. Unexpected, almost surreal. Warm bread, real bread, the kind none of them have tasted since the winter of '42, when wheat began vanishing from German supply lines. Several men pause, involuntarily inhaling. Karl feels a pang in his stomach, so sharp he has to steady himself against the truck. The Americans notice the reaction. One MP, a tall kid with freckles who can't be more than 20, glances at their hollow faces. He nudges a fellow guard and lowers his voice, though the prisoners hear anyway. "Jesus, look at 'em. They need feeding." The remark is not mocking, just honest. The Germans exchange glances, uncertain, wary. They're not used to enemies displaying anything resembling concern. A whistle blows. The column forms. Boots shuffle. The prisoners march toward the processing building, their shadows stretching long across the yard, as the first true sunlight of the morning cuts through the dust. Inside the building, the atmosphere shifts from stark military order to something unnervingly procedural. Papers rustle, typewriters hammer. A medic shines a penlight into Karl's eyes and checks his pulse with cool, steady fingers. The man doesn't speak German, but he taps Karl's arm, pointing toward a station further down the line. Another POW mutters, "They treat cattle worse in Germany." A few nod silently. The line moves toward a wide counter, where a pair of cooks push trays across steel rails. The smell grows richer. Meat, vegetables, potatoes, all mingling in warm, steamy air. For a moment, the prisoners freeze. It's too much, too impossible. When Karl reaches the counter, A cook, an older man with a stained apron and a cigarette hanging from his lip, jerks his chin toward the tray. "Go on, take it." Carl stares at the food. Thick slices of beef, carrots glazed with something sweet, mashed potatoes, actual potatoes, not the gray turnip substitute the Wehrmacht had relied on for 2 years. He swallows hard. Dürfen wir wirklich? Are we really allowed? The cook doesn't understand the words, but he understands the tone. "You're here, might as well eat." One of the German sergeants behind Carl steps forward, voice low but fierce with disbelief. "This is for us?" "For now, yeah." The cook shrugs. "You guys get the same as our boys." For a moment, the room goes so quiet you can hear the steam valves hissing. Same rations as American soldiers? The idea is absurd, insulting even.
Yet the proof sits right there, piled high on a tin tray the way food hasn't appeared in Germany since before Stalingrad. Carl takes the tray in both hands, afraid it might vanish the moment he blinks. When he sits at one of the long tables, he hesitates. Around him, other POWs do the same, staring at their meals as though expecting a commandant to yank it away. But no one does. The first bite tastes unreal. Warm, soft, rich. The second bite is worse. It nearly makes him cry. He isn't alone. Grown men, Waffenrock sleeves tattered and faces gaunt, lean over their trays in stunned silence. Some eat slowly, reverently. Others devour the food as if racing against time, terrified it might be their last. As the sun rises outside, spilling gold across the dusty parade ground, the most loyal soldiers of Hitler's army confront a truth none of them imagined. America, the enemy, feeds them better than Germany ever could again. Carl sets down his fork, hands trembling. If this is day one, what else are they about to learn?
The first full day inside Camp Swift begins not with commands or punishment, but with something far more disarming: routine. Predictable, almost gentle routine. The kind that feels alien to men who have spent years sleeping under artillery flashes and scraping frozen mud from their boots in places they'd rather forget. By mid-morning, the Texas sun is already climbing, painting the barracks in a hazy shimmer. Inside Barracks 14B, the German POWs are still adjusting to the idea that they are not being starved, interrogated, or marched until collapse. They sit on bunks that don't sag, under rafters that don't leak, absorbing the quiet hum of a camp waking up. Karl-Heinz Brugner sits on the edge of his bunk, turning his metal fork between his fingers like it's a luxury item. In a way, it is. That morning's breakfast had been even more unsettling than yesterday's dinner. Scrambled eggs, toast, butter, real butter, and hot coffee that didn't taste like burnt chicory or barley sweepings. He can't shake it. Something is wrong. Or maybe something is too right. Across the room, Unteroffizier Matthias Keller, a stocky man from Dusseldorf with hands like shovels, is staring at the remains of his breakfast tray as if it might speak to him. Carl clears his throat. "You're quiet." Matthias doesn't look up. "They gave us bacon." His voice trembles in a way that has nothing to do with fear. "My wife hasn't had bacon since 41. Carl exhales slowly. "Neither has my mother." Outside, footsteps crunch on the gravel. American guards doing their rounds. Not shouting, not searching for excuses to strike anyone, just walking, keeping order. It's unnerving how normal it seems. A shout drifts in from another barracks. Laughter follows. German laughter. Matthias rises and goes to the window. Karl joins him. Outside, a small group of POWs is clustered near the fence line. An American MP is standing with them, gesturing with animated hands as he explains something none of the Germans quite grasp. Each time he reenacts the motion, swinging a bat, stepping forward, the men laugh harder. "He's teaching them baseball," Karl says softly.
Matthias rubs his jaw. What kind of war is this? We fight them, they lock us up, and then they teach us games? Karl watches the guard's easy posture, the casual way he holds his rifle. It's not the war we expected. Morning rolls into afternoon, and with it comes a new revelation. Work assignments. Not forced labor, not punishment, just tasks. Controlled, supervised tasks that pay in camp currency, enough to buy snacks or stationery at the canteen. When the announcement is made, a murmur ripples through the prisoners. Matthias snorts. Work? Voluntary? They expect us to believe this. But minutes later, a group of volunteers forms. Curiosity is stronger than suspicion. Karl joins them. They're marched to a supply building at the far end of the camp. Inside, fans hum, spinning warm air through the rafters. American quartermasters hand out brooms, paint cans, toolkits, mundane equipment that feels remarkably harmless. A sergeant with a sun-reddened face approaches the group. "All right, fellas," he says, clapping his hands. "You keep this place tidy, paint what needs painting, and we'll all get along just fine. No nonsense, no drama." A few POWs exchange skeptical looks. The sergeant smirks. "Look, I get it. You thought America was going to beat you half to death." He shrugs. "But here's the thing. We feed you because the Geneva Convention says so. We treat you decent because it keeps the peace. And you work because there's nothing worse than a man with too much time and nothing to do." His tone is so fact of life, so profoundly unbothered, that it disarms the entire group more effectively than any threat could. Karl can't help noticing something. The sergeant never once calls them Krauts. As the workday starts, Karl finds himself repairing a window frame by Side Corporal Jim Whitaker, a lanky Texan who whistles constantly. Jim doesn't talk much at first, just works, measures, hammers. Finally, he glances at Karl and says, "Where'd they get you?" Karl hesitates. "Near Salerno." Jim nods. "Hell of a fight." Karl tightens a screw and says, "I didn't expect this." Jim chuckles. "Most don't."
By the time the afternoon ends and the prisoners march back toward the barracks, something intangible is shifted. Not loyalty, never that, but perspective. The men walk slower, shoulders lower. Eyes drift toward the canteen windows, where a baker inside pulls steaming loaves from the oven. The smell catches them again, warm, comforting, dangerously human. Karl finds Matthias watching the scene with furrowed brows. "What?" Karl asks. Matthias swallows. "If they treat the enemy like this, what does that say about us?" Karl doesn't answer. He can't, because the question is bigger than the moment, bigger than the camp, and it gnaws at him with a growing intensity. The day ends with the Texas sky turning orange, then purple, shadows stretching long across barbed wire that looks less like a cage and more like a boundary line in an unfamiliar world. That night, as Karl lies awake on a mattress softer than anything he slept on in years, he realizes something dangerous. He no longer fears the Americans. He fears what this kindness might reveal about the world beyond the war. 2 weeks into camp life, the shock has dulled, but the disbelief hasn't. Routines have formed, friendships have begun to settle, and the Germans have learned exactly when the bakery ovens fire up each morning. But every time the warm scent of bread drifts across the camp, it sparks the same murmured conversations, the same uneasy questions. May 2nd, 1944. 06:48 hours. Karl-Heinz Bruckner stands in line outside the mess hall, morning sun on his face, metal tray in hand. The line shuffles forward slowly, and inside he can hear the clatter of pans, the familiar scrape of ladles against steel. Breakfast. He should be used to it by now. He isn't. Behind him, Feldwebel Otto Schurmann grumbles under his breath, voice low and gravelly. They feed us better here in captivity than Goering feeds the Luftwaffe. A few men chuckle bitterly. It's not even a joke, it's just the truth, dressed like humor. Up ahead, a cook pushes through the swinging door, carrying a tray piled with fresh biscuits. The sight alone feels like a provocation. Proof that the Americans are either insane, spoiled beyond comprehension, or simply operating on a level of abundance Karl can't fully grasp. When it's his turn at the counter, the cook, same older man with the same cigarette glued to lip, looks him over. "Morning," the man says. He plops eggs and biscuits onto the tray, then without ceremony adds 2 strips of crisp bacon. He stops. I did not ask for extra." The cook shrugs. "It ain't extra. It's the serving." It hits him like a blow. This is the serving. This would be a feast back home. He carries the tray to a table where Matthias Keller and a few others are already seated. The conversation halts as Karl sits, everyone aware of the same quiet truth. They are eating the food that American soldiers eat. Daily. Casually. Without fear that tomorrow will bring less. Matthias picks up a biscuit, turning it in his hand. "I used to work in a bakery," he says quietly. "In Cologne. Before the shortages, before the bombings." He takes a bite, closes his eyes for a moment. "When I get home, if there is a home, I don't know if I can tell them this. They won't believe me." Karl nods. No one will. Across the table, 19-year-old Gefreiter Lucas Steiner is already writing something in his small notebook. Thin pages filled with cramped handwriting. Diaries are allowed, even encouraged. "What are you recording now?" Matthias asks. Lucas doesn't look up. "Everything. Every meal. Every detail." He taps the page. "For later, when people ask what it was like." Karl leans over to read a line. "American bread is soft, real wheat, not sawdust. Smells like Sundays before the war." The simplicity of it hurts. After breakfast, the men are marched to their work teams. Karl's group is assigned to the agricultural field just beyond the wire, escorted, watched, but not mistreated. Rows of corn shimmer in the wind. Irrigation ditches sparkle under the morning sun. An American farmer contracted by the army, Mr. Harlan, works alongside them. 60 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet. He shows the Germans how to build windbreaks and check soil moisture. His instructions are firm, but never cruel. During a break, he offers them cold water from a large jug. Otto eyes the jug suspiciously. "You trust us with this?" Harlan wipes his brow. "Son, it's water. You need it same as anybody else." The man's casual decency is a jarring contrast to the propaganda the Germans were raised on. It gnaws at them all day. As they work, scattered conversations drift across the field. We lost half our rations on the Eastern Front. Half. My company was living on rutabagas by last winter. The horses were starving. We ate too to survive. They serve meat here. Actual meat.
Every statement carries the same undertone. How could the enemy have more than the fatherland? By the time they returned to camp in the afternoon, sweat-soaked and sun-tired, the prisoners expect the fatigue. What they don't expect is what waits in the barracks. On the footlockers, one for each man, sits a package. Issued clothing. Clean, intact, perfectly fitted American fatigue jackets to replace threadbare field tunics. A camp policy. Basic dignity, they call it. Lucas runs his thumb along the stitchwork. "This must have taken hours to sew," he whispers. Carl studies the jacket in his hands. The cotton is soft, strong, new. It's the first new garment he's touched since 1941. Matthias sits heavily on his bunk. "Do they not understand," he mutters, "what this will do to us?" Carl frowns. "What do you mean?" Matthias looks up, eyes raw and conflicted. "It's harder to hate a man who feeds you, harder to despise a country that heals your wounds, clothes your back, and gives you bread you haven't tasted in years." Silence follows. Thick, uncomfortable. True. Outside, the American flag snaps in the wind. Inside, the prisoners sense a shift they can't quite name. A crack forming, not in loyalty, but in certainty. The world they were raised to believe in is not aligning with the world they are witnessing, and that mismatch is becoming unbearable. The day ends with one final shock, delivered by the camp loudspeaker as the sun dips below the horizon, turning the sky blood red. "Beginning tomorrow, all POWs are eligible for correspondence privileges. Letters. Home." Letters. To Germany. To a nation starving. Carl feels the words settle like a weight in his chest. What will he even write? May 9th, 1944. Late afternoon. The barracks are unusually quiet. Not from fear. Fear has long since given way to something more complicated, but from concentration. Every man sits hunched over a wooden table or their bunk, pencil in hand, staring down at a single sheet of paper provided by the American camp office. Letter writing day. Outside, the Texas breeze rattles the tin roofs. Inside, the air is thick with hesitation. Karl-Heinz Bruckner sits with the pencil poised above the page. He's written nothing, not a word. Not because he lacks things to say, but because he has too many. How do you tell your family, still under rationing, still living through fire and ruin, that you, their son, are eating better in an enemy camp than they are in their own home? Matthias Keller sits beside him, his paper already filled with blocky handwriting. Carl tilts his head. "You've written?" he asks. Matthias exhales, rubbing the tension from his neck. "I've written something, but not the truth." Carl studies him. "What did you leave out?" Matthias's face hardens. "Everything they don't need to know. That I had roast chicken yesterday, or that I had milk so fresh it tasted like my childhood, or that we're—" He stops, jaw tightening. "That we are safe." The word hangs between them, as fragile as glass. Across the barracks, young Lucas Steiner finishes his letter and folds it carefully. His hands tremble, not with fear, but with guilt. "It feels wrong," he murmurs to no one in particular.
writing to my mother while she waits in line for powdered eggs. A few men nod grimly. The American guards don't rush them. They step in occasionally to collect finished letters, but otherwise linger by the doorway, chatting softly among themselves. Polite, patient. It creates a strange sense of normalcy, a bubble suspended far from Europe's collapsing reality. Karl finally bends over his page. Liebe Mutter. The pencil scratches slowly.
I am alive. I am treated well. Do not worry for me. He stops. His throat tightens. He forces himself to continue. We receive food. Enough food. More than I can describe. He stares at the sentence. Even that feels like betrayal. He crosses it out. We receive food. That is enough. That is safe. That does not wound. But the truth claws at him. He feels it every time the mess hall doors swing open and the smell of fresh bread drifts out. Every time he sees an American soldier share water, jokes, even cigarettes with a man wearing a Wehrmacht eagle on his sleeve. How do you describe something that feels impossible? How do you admit that the enemy is treating you like a human being? A whistle sounds outside. Mail collection time. Papers shuffle. Men fold their letters. Some seal them with shaking hands. Others tuck them into envelopes with a kind of reverence, as though each page were a prayer being shipped across the Atlantic. As the guard approaches, Karl hesitates. His letter is still unfinished. He flips the paper over and adds a final line. I hope the war ends soon, for all of us. He hands it over. The guard, a broad-shouldered sergeant with gentle eyes, nods. I'll make sure it gets through. Karl can only manage a quiet danke. Later, after dinner, pork chops, green beans, warm bread, the men gather outside the barracks. The sky is turning violet, stars emerging one by one. The air smells of dust and pine and distant cattle. They sit on wooden steps, watching as the last rays fade. Matthias breaks the silence first. You know what will happen when our families receive those letters? Karl nods. They'll think we're exaggerating. Worse. Matthias leans forward.
They'll think America is a land of miracles. And Germany? Matthias doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Everyone knows. Germany is starving. Germany is burning. Germany is losing. And here, thousands of miles away, behind wire that keeps them in but also keeps the chaos out, they sit, fed, clothed, sheltered. It's an unforgiving kind of irony. Just then, a convoy of supply trucks pulls into the camp yard. Headlights sweep across the dirt. Men watch silently as crates are unloaded. Meat, flour, vegetables, sacks of sugar. Sugar. A luxury their families haven't tasted in years. Karl watches a crate marked fresh produce, fragile, being set down gently by 2 MPs. That single crate carries more nutrition than his entire battalion received in the last months before his capture. Matthias murmurs. Do you see it? Carl frowns. See what? Matthias points at the trucks, the crates, the effortless abundance. This, he says, is why Germany cannot win. A cold truth unfurls through Carl's chest. A truth louder than artillery. A truth clearer than any propaganda leaflet. War isn't only fought with rifles. It's fought with supply. With full stomachs. With the ability to feed your soldiers and even your enemies. The realization lands heavily between them. For the first time, the Germans are not just questioning the Reich's strength, they are questioning its survival. Tomorrow, something will happen that makes it all even harder to ignore.
May 14th, 1944, 13:20 hours, Camp Swift. The mess hall doors swing open for the midday meal and a wave of warm air rolls out, thick with the smell of something unmistakable. Roasted turkey. Not chicken. Turkey. The kind of holiday feast German families once saved for Christmas or rare celebrations before the war rationed everything into extinction. The POWs stop in their tracks. Matthias is the first to whisper it. Nein, nicht möglich. But it is possible, and it's right there. Inside, long trays gleam beneath heat lamps, sliced turkey breast, gravy, stuffing, peas, soft rolls brushed with melted butter. The sight alone steals the breath from the room. For a moment, none of the Germans move. It feels like walking into a memory that shouldn't exist anymore. An American corporal behind the counter smirks. Don't just stare at it, fellas. Grab a tray. They do. Slowly, as if approaching a shrine. Carl steps forward last, his heartbeat a dull thud in his ears. He hasn't seen this much food in one place since he was a teenager. The corporal ladles gravy over the turkey. Special delivery from Fort Hood. Consider yourselves lucky. The word hits like a slap. Carl takes his seat at the table. Men around him stare at their plates, stunned into reverent silence. Only the clatter of utensils breaks the stillness. Halfway through the meal, an argument erupts at a nearby table. Unteroffizier Rudi Eisler throws down his fork, face red, voice shaking. "This isn't right," he snarls. "We shouldn't be eating like this, not while our families—" He can't finish. Gefreiter Lukas Steiner tries to call him. "Rudi, please." "No," Rudi stands, fists trembling. "You think this is kindness? This decadence?" His voice rises. "This is victory. This is what it looks like when one nation can feed its prisoners better than another can feed its soldiers." A few men stare down at their plates, ashamed. Others look away entirely. The Americans glance over, but do nothing. It's an internal storm, not theirs to manage. Carl watches Rudi, sees the quiver in his shoulders, the pain in his eyes.
It isn't anger. It's grief. Rudi sinks back into his seat, elbows on the table, hands covering his face. No one speaks. The silence is heavy and raw. Finally, Matthias murmurs, "He's right."
Karl blinks. "What do you mean?" Matthias gestures around the room. "This, all of this. It is torture of a different kind." "Torture?" Karl asks. Matthias nods. "Yes, because it forces us to admit something we cannot say aloud." He leans closer, voice a broken whisper. "That our country cannot protect us, cannot feed us, cannot win." The truth slices deeper than any wound. After lunch, the men are marched out to the recreation field. It's baseball again. A few POWs have grown surprisingly fond of the game, their competitive instincts overcoming their skepticism. But today, the mood is different. Quieter, subdued. An American MP tosses a ball to Karl. "You're up." Karl catches it automatically. "Why do you teach us this?" he asks without thinking. The MP shrugs. "Why not?" "It's strange," Karl admits. "What is?" Karl struggles for the right words. "That you can fight us in Europe, then play games with us here." The MP plants the bat in the dirt, thinking. "Look, war's war. But here?" He taps his chest. "Here you're just men doing time until it's over." Karl doesn't respond. The simplicity of the statement hits too close to the truth. The game resumes, but Karl's mind remains somewhere else, somewhere thousands of miles away, in a nation rationing every crumb, searching every cellar for shelter as Allied planes scream overhead. Later that evening, as the sun dips low and the cicadas sing from the trees, the prisoners gather outside the barracks. The heat has softened. Shadows stretch long across the ground. That's when a commotion rises near the main gate. A jeep pulls up, carrying fresh mail, more letters from home. The distribution begins. Names are called, papers exchanged, emotions simmer under every breath. Karl receives one. Thin, light, his mother's handwriting. He steps aside, heart pounding. "Mein Sohn." Her letter begins, warm, hopeful, but breaks halfway through with a description of ration lines growing longer, bread growing thinner, neighbors losing weight, bombings in the night, fear in the streets. Then a sentence that stops him cold. "We worry for you, but we hope, truly hope, that the Americans feed you enough to stay strong." Karl's breath catches. His mother, living under a blacked-out sky, is praying that the enemy can do what Germany can no longer manage. He folds the letter carefully, hands trembling. Around him, men stand in silence, broken only by soft sobs or whispered curses. Some sink onto the steps, reading by the fading light. Rudi Eisler, who raged at lunch, sits motionless with his mother's letter in his lap. "Does she say they're hungry?" Matthias asks gently. Rudi nods, eyes fixed on nothing. "She says the children on our street fight over potato peels." No one knows what to say. The camp lights flicker on. Moths swarm the bulbs. Somewhere in the distance, an American soldier laughs at a joke. The sound seems to come from a different world entirely. And in that moment, as two realities collide, one of abundance, one of desperation,
Something inside Carl finally breaks. Not loyalty, not honor, but the illusion. The illusion that Germany can outlast this. The illusion that the Reich have strength left to give. The illusion that sacrifice alone can win a war already lost in the stomachs of its people. Tomorrow will bring an even harder truth, one that no one in Barracks 14B is prepared for.
May 21st, 1944, 10:05 hours. A dry heat settles over Camp Swift, thick enough that the dust hangs in the air like suspended smoke. The prisoners line up for roll call, squinting against the sun. Karl-Heinz Bruckner wipes sweat from his brow, but his thoughts are still on his mother's letter from days earlier. He hasn't slept right since. As the formation stands waiting, an American officer steps onto a wooden platform at the center of the yard. Captain Robert Alden, tall, composed, late 30s, the kind of man whose posture screams military discipline, even when he's at ease. He holds a clipboard under one arm. The guards shift. The Germans sense something is coming. Alden raises a hand, signaling for quiet. "Listen up, gentlemen. We have updates regarding the war. Per policy, you're entitled to hear major news that concerns your homeland. The POWs tense. Updates. News from the front. Truth they can't control." Alden glances at the clipboard. He hesitates, not in uncertainty, but in the way a man hesitates before delivering a blow. He reads, "First item. The Allies have landed at Anzio. Fighting continues south of Rome." The Germans murmur. They already suspected as much. Not a shock, not the blow they fear. Then Alden inhales. Second item. Large sections of the Ruhr industrial region have been heavily bombed. Damage is significant. A collective breath goes out. The Ruhr. Germany's beating industrial heart. But still, this is pain they've learned to endure. Then comes the final blow. Third item, Alden says, voice steady. A message from the International Red Cross. Germany's food distribution has been further restricted. Reports indicate widespread shortages in several regions. The camp goes silent. Completely silent. Alden continues, unaware of the emotional crater he's just opened. Civilian rations have been reduced again, bread, fats, and meat especially. Someone in the ranks lets out a quiet, strangled noise. Not a cry, something deeper. Carl feels the world tilt under him. More shortages? Less food? How much less can there even be? As the officer steps down, the Germans look at one another, not with shock, but with something worse, recognition. They've known this truth in their bones since the moment they tasted American bread. Rudy Eisler collapses onto the nearest bench as soon as formation breaks. He buries his face in his hands. Matthias sits beside him, saying nothing. What words could possibly bridge two continents of suffering? Carl sinks down in front of them. They said the Ruhr is hit badly, Matthias whispers. My family lives 20 kilometers from Essen. Rudy's voice cracks. My brother works in a factory there. If it's gone, he can't finish. He doesn't need to. Around the yard, men sit in tight circles or pace aimlessly, trying to process news from a country that feels more distant with each passing day. The Texas wind blows warm and indifferent, carrying the smell of pine and dust. Nothing like home, yet terrifyingly safe. A few POWs gravitate toward the fence, not to escape, just to look beyond the wire,
to pretend the open fields beyond mean freedom instead of containment. Under a shaded awning near the barracks, Carl sees something out of place. 3 American soldiers walk by eating apples, bright, red, perfect apples that glisten in the sun. They bite casually, chatting between mouthfuls. Carl watches, transfixed. An apple. Such a simple thing. Such an impossible luxury for his mother. One soldier catches his stare and pauses. "You want one?" he asks, holding out a spare fruit. Carl blinks. The offer feels unreal. His voice falters. "No, thank you." The soldier shrugs and pockets it. He keeps walking. Carl sits down hard on the nearest step. Matthias joins him, staring after the Americans. "Do you realize," Matthias says quietly, "how long it's been since we saw an apple?" Carl nods slowly. 2 years, maybe more. Matthias exhales. "This isn't just supply, it's wealth." Carl looks up. "Wealth?" "Yes." Matthias says, "Enough wealth to feed their soldiers, their people, and us. Thousands of us." The words settle between them like lead.
In the days that follow, the mood in the camp shifts. Not visibly, not in ways the guards would notice, but internally, in the quiet spaces, in the way conversations falter, in the way letters home take twice as long to write. The Germans begin to understand something few soldiers ever want to admit. This war is no longer about who fights harder. It's about who can afford to fight at all. One evening, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, Carl overhears 2 POWs debating near the fence. Their voices are tense, urgent. If America can do this, if they can feed us like this, how much more can they give their own armies? More than we can imagine, the other replies. Carl closes his eyes. He knows they're right. He's known since the first bite of fresh bread. But tonight, that truth morphs into something new, something heavier. Because earlier, at mail call, another letter had arrived. A short one. Just 3 lines. His mother wrote, "The ration is smaller again. We are doing our best. Stay safe, my son." Carl stares at the words long into the night, his heart caught between 2 worlds, one starving, one overflowing. But tomorrow, a new revelation will shatter even the last traces of denial. A revelation that sweeps into the camp with such force that not a single man will ignore it. Not after what they witness.
May 29th, 1944. 1540 hours. An unexpected convoy pulls into Camp Swift. 5 trucks, each covered with canvas tarps tied down tight, engines coughing in the afternoon heat. The prisoners pause from their work assignments as the vehicles grind to a halt near the administrative building. Dust rises in thick waves. No one knows what's happening, but the Americans seem tense, focused, purposeful. A whistle shrills. Guards move quickly, forming a corridor toward the yard. The POWs gather in knots, whispering. What is this? A transfer? New prisoners? Karl-Heinz Bruckner steps forward for a better view. Matthias and Rudy flank him. The air feels heavy, electrified. Then the first truck's canvas is pulled back. Gasps ripple across the yard. Inside sit German prisoners, not from North Africa, not from Italy, but from Germany itself, recently captured, fresh from the homeland. Their uniforms are recognizable, but their bodies, they look half dead, thin, gray,
eyes sunken into skulls, cheeks hollow, lips cracked, skin stretched tight over bones, as if the mere effort of being alive has become a burden. The camp goes silent. The new arrivals are ordered down from the truck, but most can only stumble, arms out for balance. One man collapses before his boots touch the ground, and 2 Americans rush to lift him. Rudy grips the fence so hard his knuckles whiten. "Mein Gott!" It's barely a whisper. Carl feels his stomach turn. These men aren't prisoners of war. They're survivors of starvation. A medic steps in, barking orders. Stretchers appear. Water is passed out. Some POWs drink desperately, water spilling down their chins. Others are too weak even to hold the cups. Guards steady their hands. Matthias stares, eyes glassy. "They're from home," he says numbly. Home looks like that now. One of the new arrivals, a former artilleryman named Dieter Rapp, is guided toward a bench. He can hardly walk. His legs shake beneath him like saplings in a storm. He sits across from Carl, who instinctively kneels to help. Close up, the truth becomes horrifyingly clear. Dieter weighs no more than a teenager. His ribs jut out. His collarbones looked sharp enough to tear his shirt. Carl presses a cup of water into the man's hand. "Drink slowly." Dieter lifts haunted eyes. You are from this camp?" "Yes," Carl says softly. "You're safe now." Dieter swallows a mouthful of water, coughing afterward. "It's worse," he whispers, voice shredded at the edges. "It's worse than you know."
Carl leans in. What is? Dieter's eyes fill. Not with tears, but with something far darker. Resignation. The cities. There's hardly anything left. Bread is half sawdust. Meat is a memory. Children faint in the streets during ration lines. The words hit like shrapnel. Other POWs gather around Dieter, drawn in by the gravity of his voice. "Is it true?" someone asks. "Are things that bad?" Dieter nods weakly. "Yes. Worse." He gestures vaguely at the surrounding camp, the barracks, the bakery, the water barrel glinting in the sun. You eat in one meal, than some families see in a week. The prisoners fall silent. Even the American guards seem to sense the shift. One of them opens a crate from the supply truck. Fruit, canned milk, crackers, intended for medical intake. He moves among the weakened men, handing items out with gentle patience. The contrast is unbearable. Fresh fruit, crackers, milk, given freely to German soldiers who look like ghosts. Matthias murmurs, "I can't watch this," but he can't look away either. None of them can. The prisoners stand in a semicircle as the new arrivals are tended to, washed, fed, assessed. The medical team works with practiced efficiency, voices calm but urgent. Finally, Dieter looks up at Carl again. He gestures toward the mess hall in the distance. "Do you truly eat there?" Carl hesitates. He doesn't want to answer. He doesn't want to confirm the truth. "Yes," he finally says. "We eat well." Dieter lets out a sound. Not quite a sob. Not quite a laugh. A broken sound. "You're prisoners," he says. "And you eat like kings." Matthias squeezes his eyes shut. Rudy's jaw clenches so tightly it looks painful. A distant siren from a military drill wails somewhere beyond the camp. None of the Germans flinch. They're too numb for instinct. The last of the weakened prisoners are guided toward the infirmary building. Some carried, some supported by medics. The convoy of trucks is unloaded, then rumbles slowly back down the road, leaving a silence so deep it presses against the ears. Karl sinks onto the nearest bench. He feels hollow, scraped out. Everything he believed, everything he clung to about Germany's strength, about its endurance, feels like ashes. Matthias finally speaks, voice small but steady. They weren't beaten by the Allies. They were beaten by hunger. Matthias nods slowly. That's what war really is, isn't it? Karl looks toward the mess hall, then at the infirmary, then back at the dust rising from where the convoy had been. And for the first time, he understands the full truth. Germany isn't losing the war. Germany has already lost the war. The world just hasn't finished saying it yet. Tomorrow will bring arguments, confessions, and something close to mutiny inside Barracks 14B, because not every man will accept what he saw today. Not yet.
May 30th, 1944. Dawn. The sky is washed in pale oranges and pinks as the sun peeks over the prairie. Normally, the camp would be waking in quiet routine. Boots lacing, bunks rustling, men lining up for the mess hall with the sluggish calm of soldiers resigned to monotony. Not today. Barracks 14B is already alive with voices, low, sharp, agitated. Karl stands near the center aisle, watching the argument unfold like a wildfire catching dry grass. Rudi Eisler is at the center of it, pacing like a caged wolf, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. "You all saw them," he shouts. "Those men from the homeland, did they look like soldiers? Did they look like a nation winning a war?" A handful mutter in agreement. Others avoid making eye contact. Matthias closes his hands around a mug of coffee, as if grounding himself. "We don't need to argue," he says quietly. "We know what we saw." But Rudi won't let it go. He turns sharply toward a cluster of men on the left side of the room, the true believers, the ones who still cling to the propaganda like it's oxygen. Among them is Obergefreiter Franz Kappel, a gaunt but defiant figure who hasn't surrendered a single thought to doubt since arriving. "Weakness," Franz snaps. "That's what you saw. The weak break first. Germany will endure. The Führer will feed us?" Rudi interrupts with bitter laughter. "Will he send us bread across the ocean? Will he send milk for the children fainting in the ration lines?" Franz's face flushes red. "You are a coward." "And you," Rudi fires back, "are blind." The room erupts. Men stand, step forward, shout over one another. The tension threatens to snap into something physical. Karl steps between them before anyone throws a punch. "Stop!" he barks, louder than he intended. The sudden silence is sharp enough to sting. He looks from Franz to Rudi, then to the entire barracks. "Yesterday," Karl says, voice steady but heavy, "we saw what the war is doing to our people. Not soldiers, civilians, mothers, children, neighbors. They're starving." He lets that word linger. Starving. A few men look away. One wipes his eyes discreetly. Karl continues, softer now. "If Germany could take care of them, it would have. If Germany could feed the army, it would have. If Germany could win," he swallows, "it would not look like this." Franz opens his mouth to retort, but this time there's hesitation, a tiny crack, doubt like a tremor in stone. Before he can speak, the door opens and a guard sticks his head in. "Mess hall is open. Turkey hash today. Move if you're hungry." The irony hits the room like a hammer. Turkey hash. A comfort meal. A meal that half the men's families couldn't dream of affording even before the war. One by one, they file out to get breakfast. But the mood has shifted. No jokes, no chatter, only footsteps. As Karl walks with Matthias and Rudy, they pass the infirmary. Through the window, they see the newly arrived POWs resting in clean beds. Some are being spoon-fed broth. Others receive vitamins or medicine. Karl stops. He watches a medic adjust a blanket around a frail soldier who can hardly lift his head. The medic's movements are gentle, practiced. Matthias joins him at the window. "It feels wrong," he whispers, "to see our own receive kindness we couldn't give them." Karl nods slowly. "No, it feels clarifying." They continue to the mess hall. The warmth and smell of food greet them instantly. Meat, onions, hot coffee. A paradox in every breath. At their table, Lucas Steiner pulls out his notebook again, scribbling furiously. "What are you writing now?" Karl asked. Lucas glances up. His eyes are clearer today. Harder, but clearer. "The truth," he says simply. "Someone will have to remember it."
After breakfast, work assignments resume. Karl's team returns to the same fields, but their movements are slower, their thoughts elsewhere. Even Jim Whittaker, usually cheerfully whistling between tasks, senses the mood. "You boys look like you seen a ghost," he says lightly. Karl doesn't answer, because he has. Dozens of them, arriving in trucks from a homeland bleeding out from hunger. By afternoon, the Texas heat is oppressive. They take shade under a windbreak, drinking canteen water in silence. Rudy eventually speaks. "Well, I used to pray Germany would win," he says. "Now I pray the war ends before there's nothing left of Germany to save." No one disagrees, not even Franz, who sits nearby, his stare fixed on the dirt. As the sun begins its slow descent, the prisoners are marched back to camp. The light turns gold, catching the barbed wire and casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the yard. Karl notices something unusual near the fence, a wooden crate. Inside it, someone has left apples, bright red apples, the same kind he'd been offered yesterday. A handwritten sign reads, "Donated by local farmers." Karl picks one up. It's cool from the shade. He turns to Matthias. "This," he says, "is why they'll win." Matthias nods. "Because they can give away what we don't even have." Rudy exhales, long and shaky. "Then what are we now?" Karl looks out at the camp, at the American guards chatting easily, at the well-fed soldiers loading crates, at the ordinary abundance that flows like water here. He says softly, "We're witnesses to a truth our country will have to face, sooner or later." Night falls. The camp quiets. Crickets begin their steady rhythm. Karl lies in his bunk, staring at the wooden ceiling. The barracks is still. No arguments, no rage, just the quiet weight of realization settling over every man. For the first time, none of them can pretend. The war is already decided. Not by tanks or planes or even battles, but by bread, by supply, by the simple, inescapable fact that the side who can feed prisoners better than the enemy can feed soldiers has already won. Carl closes his eyes. Tomorrow will be another day of work, another day behind wire, another day of strange peace. But something fundamental has shifted. He no longer fears the Americans. He no longer hates them. He fears what will be left of home.